Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ann Klein. I'm the Director of Sustainability of Member Services at PSC, and we're thrilled to have you here today for the third in a series of webinars on sustainable ingredient sourcing. Just a couple of logistics before we get started. Please have your microphones and video off. We'll be utilizing the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen for questions for the panel. So please be sure to add any questions you might have for the panel in that box. My colleague Ashley Lane, who's our manager of the accreditation program, will be fielding questions. And please also use the chat box. We'll be monitoring the chat box as well. My colleague Amy Maxey, who is our member services specialist, senior specialist, will also be online and fielding things in the chat. So welcome to everyone. This webinar will be recorded and the slides will be sent out to all of the registrants after the call. And before we get started, since this is about protein and the 4-factor framework, we've got a poll for our audience. Amy, do you want to launch that poll for us? So the poll is, have you downloaded and read the 4-factor framework for sustainable protein evaluation? Love to see all those yeses in here. That's great. 68%. Fantastic. That's super helpful to know for the panel. So thank you. All right, I'm going to move to the next slide. And just for those of you who are here and don't know who PSC is, or this is the first PSC webinar you've ever attended, I just wanted to share with you a little bit about who we are. We're a nonprofit industry group that services the pet industry on advancing their sustainability practices. We serve approximately 200 members and growing. We're global in reach. About 20% of our members have membership bases outside of North America, and that continues to grow. We support the entire pet industry throughout the supply chain, from retailers and then to the end consumer to ingredients. So it's a very dynamic and wonderful group of members. Our two main areas of focus at PSC, first and foremost, we support our members on their own sustainability journeys. They receive a number of benefits to help advance their sustainability practices. Number two, we tackle large-scale industry issues that impact the entire pet industry, and we serve as a collaborative hub for that work. We have three major industry-wide objectives. The three include packaging. We're doing a great deal of work on packaging, and you've probably seen a lot about that. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the third critical one that brings us here today is sustainable ingredient sourcing. So as we look at sustainable ingredient sourcing, we launched the 4-factor framework to help our members and the industry really look at ingredient sustainability in a holistic manner across these 4 indices. So we all know that pet food has to be nutritional and support the nutritional needs of companion animals. But without assessing environmental impact, the social impact of the workers who create the food and the animals and how they're treated that go into the food, these 4 factors are really critical. So that leads us today to our member panel. And We have assembled a wonderful group of members. Our members are embracing the four-factor framework in a pretty aggressive way, looking at the four factors. And we have 4 fantastic member companies joining us here today. From ingredients with ADM to brands, Pecurian Instinct and Earth Animal Ventures. Each of our wonderful panelists will introduce themselves as they field their first question in this panel. And so without further ado, let's jump in and let them introduce themselves, and we'll get started. Let's get started by having each of our panelists just introduce yourself. And in particular, start with how you are addressing the four-factor framework. Where are you on this learning curve of incorporating the four-factor framework into your work? And why don't we get started with Natalie?
Thanks, Anne. So my name's Natalie Serro. I'm here representing Pecurian today, and I'm the nutrition manager here at Pecurian. In other talks, you might have seen our sustainability manager hop on the call, but we thought it was fit for someone from our nutrition team to come talk today, given how important nutrition is in the four-factor framework. And if you haven't heard about Pecurian, a little bit about us is that we're a Chilliwack, British Columbia, Canadian company. We've been around since 1999, and our main brands are Go Solutions, Now Fresh, Gather, and Summit. So I'd say that sustainability has really always been a very big part of our business, a very important pillar of how we do things. But especially over the last couple of years, not only our consumers, but the industry is really demanding for companies to put work into sustainability and back up that word. So when it comes to Pecurian, I think really one of our strongest ways of incorporating the four-factor framework into our business is from a nutritional standpoint. So we really try to take a science-based approach to how we put forth our formulations, and we have this sort of philosophy around protein. If you look at what's actually needed for the requirements of pets, there's a certain amount of protein that is needed for them. And anything beyond that is really excess, not only metabolically, but environmentally, it's kind of just wasted. So we kind of have this approach to take a more moderate approach to protein when we're formulating our recipes, and know that we can do that, of course, using some animal-based protein sources, but really leaning on our plant-based protein sources as well to help meet the nutrient requirements of pets. Beyond that, we're also incorporating the other 3 factors of the framework, but I think I'll leave a little bit for my other panelists to touch on there.
Awesome. Thank you. Jennifer, just introduce yourself and share with us how you are incorporating the four-factor framework.
All right, thanks, Anne. Hi, I'm Jennifer Adolph. I'm Companion Animal Technical Manager at ADM, where I'm responsible for providing technical support, nutrition training, formulation services, and new product development for ADM's customers in the pet food industry. My PhD is in companion animal nutrition, and I've worked in both human and animal nutrition for over 20 years. And ADM is one of the world's largest agricultural companies and is committed to improving lives around the globe, including pets. So I would say that ADM takes a similar approach to our sustainability strategy as outlined in PSC's four-factor framework. ADM really has an unwavering commitment to global sustainability with a holistic view of land use, climate action, and clean water. So I'll just touch on each of those 4 briefly. So ADM has set ambitious sustainability targets in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, energy intensity, water usage, and diverting waste from landfills. One of our main key sustainability goals is to eliminate all deforestation in our supply chain by 2030. And we have been able to reach this milestone with 100% traceability of our soy supply chain in South America. Of course, nutrition is at the core of ADM as an ingredient supplier, and we're really trying to help to support our customers use plant-based and alternative protein sources, everything from pulses to ancient grains and dried yeast. We use a science-based approach and conduct research to ensure that these ingredients are acceptable for pets and can really be incorporated into a complete and balanced diet. On social impact, we have our ADM Cares program, which provides corporate funding to various initiatives that our company aligns with. And on animal welfare, although we don't supply animal-based ingredients, we are involved, of course, in agri-food production. And we really want to take an approach to optimizing the health and nutrition of animals so that they have as low of an environmental impact as possible. So thanks for that, and I will turn it over to the other panelists.
Great. Steffi, would you introduce yourself? And I'm curious, what one thing that both Natalie and Jennifer talked about is science-based approach. Tell us about Earth Animal and how you're incorporating a science-based approach to your formulations and your work.
Sure, thanks, Anne, and hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here. My name is Steffi Bolo. I am the Chief Marketing Officer and also Head of Sustainability at Earth Animal. For those of you that don't know who Earth Animal is, we've been around since 1979. Obviously, the name Earth Animal sort of speaks for itself, but we play in 3 categories around preserving and enhancing quality of life for animals, people, and the earth. And that is really around health and wellness, food, and chews and treats for dogs primarily, and cats as well. And the 4-factor framework for sustainable protein or ingredient sourcing has been incredible for us. I think we all have this sort of inherent conflict as we are, manufacturers, creators, innovators of products for companion animals, the animals that we share our lives with, because oftentimes we're using animals that go into our either foods or treats to provide the best quality of products for our companion animals. And so, although we've been around since 1979, and I would say sustainability is absolutely in our DNA at Earth Animal, we've been suffering, I guess, from, with this conflict, because we do have a fundamental responsibility, especially because our co-founder is an integrative veterinarian and has been practicing for many, many years. So we partnered with the PSC as well as an incredible consultant, Darren Vanstone, who comes from animal welfare, animal science, and created an animal welfare framework that we actually just recently launched. It's taken us many, many months, but at the core of it, it's really taking what I think we all know internationally around the 5 freedoms of animal welfare, where, that primarily focuses on sort of freedom from pain, discomfort, fear, stress, and providing care, is to really make sure that regardless of the animals in our world, we are ensuring that while they are on this earth, they are living a good life. And we really did look to animal science and animal welfare science to help us by incorporating stakeholder feedback through Compassion World Farming, the Humane Society of the United States, and the ASPCA. So, and for us at Earth Animal, it's really not just about Earth Animal and looking at this framework through our eyes, but really hoping that others in our industry will also take this framework and use it within their organization as well, because of the impact that we have as an industry is so incredible. And I think, and my hope is that this framework can be utilized by several other organizations in the industry.
Thank you. Gordon, I know that Instinct has really interesting practices around animal welfare in particular that you're proud of. Please introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about Instinct and how you are addressing the 4-factor framework.
Well, thanks, Anne, and it's great to be amongst this panel. I feel like I'm the novice to this meeting. We're really just starting our journey, but by way of background, I'm the Chief Marketing and Growth Officer for Instinct Pet Nutrition. We've been around for about 20 years now. We are the pioneers and advocates for raw nutrition because we see, whether it's in human health or pet health, they're getting back to minimally processed, clean ingredients without all the additional hormones and other things that have gone into the human food system for decades and decades is the best way to live, and you will live a quality, a longer life. And so we're, as a company, you know, this is something we, like I said, pioneer, but we've now, in the last year or so, we've joined the Pet Sustainability Coalition to embrace the mission that you are on and to make it part of our DNA going forward. And, you know, we got together as a leadership team, and one of the first things we did was say, look, we need to contribute a significant measurable reduction in our GHG emissions and do it as fast as practical as possible. Now, the challenge, of course, is how and how quickly we're going to get there. And one of the first steps we've embraced is to focus on benchmarking our environmental impact through the scope 1, 2, 3 process. And that's really going back, understanding our suppliers, raw material streams, educating ourselves through partnerships like PSC on where are the sources of all these ingredients and how are they contributing to greenhouse gases. And so that starts the process of determining, okay, if this is where we are today, how quickly are we going to de-escalate our emissions? We already have a world-class team of nutritional expertise. We also are very much a science-driven brand. Part of what we are doing is educating the trade that you don't have to cook food at 200 degrees Fahrenheit to get you the best and safest nutrition. We have both the science behind raw, the science behind the safety of raw, and we also do it in a very balanced way. As Natalie said, we're not into excess protein. We're into balanced proteins with fruit and vegetables, very basic, clean diets. And we have extensive testing protocols to get there. But as you said, we're also very conscious of animal welfare choices that we're making. You can tell from my accent, I'm not originally from the United States, so I know the US, there's still a lot of factory farming, but other parts of the world have moved way beyond that. And it's something that we're looking to embrace and support here in the United States, because we are definitely supporters of local supply for all the ingredients that we use in making Instinct foods.
Nice, thank you. Let's talk about, I think we've heard a couple of times not exceeding the nutritional requirements for companion animals, and yet there are a lot of, there are many companies that produce foods that exceed or appear to exceed the nutritional needs of an animal. I'm wondering if the panel can just talk about this challenge as we think about sustainable protein. What would it take for the industry as a whole to really focus on bioavailability versus total volume of protein? And maybe start with Natalie to field that question.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a moving target. Like, we know we have nutritional requirements for pets, and that's something that's published and something that we can go off of. But pets are very different, and every pet has a little bit different requirements. So there's some brands out there, Petcurian included, that include a wide variety of recipe options. Some maybe on the higher end of protein to maybe meet the requirements of those pets that are more active and might need it. And then there's most of our recipes which take the more moderate protein approach. But really, I think it's consumer perception that is making it very tough for companies to, you know, consumers are asking for the most meat or the most amount of protein. And one of the ways that we really try to explain it to our retailers, our partners, our consumers, is to take a second to talk about the difference between ingredients and nutrients. So when you really think about it, a pet doesn't need meat. They really don't even need protein, really. It's the amino acids from that protein that they need. So if you really take it down to that granular level and focus on what's actually needed for the pet to meet their nutrient requirements, you can take a step back and see that there's really a bunch of ingredients that you can consider, plant ingredients included, that can be used and combined with other ingredients to meet those amino acid requirements of pets. And it doesn't always have to be the most meat is the best option, because really what many people don't necessarily understand is that once you go beyond a pet's requirement, the body cannot store that extra protein anywhere. So it's either going to be converted to fat or it's going to be excreted in the urine, which isn't great for pet owners because they can see those yellow patches, but more importantly, it's not great for the environment as well. So yeah, really just taking a step back and realizing what pets actually need are the nutrients, and kind of trying to help people understand that and keep an open mind to realize that there's many different ingredients that can be considered to meet those requirements.
Mm-hmm. Steffi, I know that this is something that you've spent a lot of time at Earth Animal considering ingredients versus nutrients and the industry's response to consumer demand. Reflect on that for us. How is Earth Animal meeting this kind of challenge, and where do you think the industry needs to go?
Yeah, this has been a little bit of a tough one. I don't think we've done ourselves, I guess, or maybe I should say we made it a little bit harder for ourselves in the industry. And I've enjoyed talking with, Natalie and Jennifer about this a little bit over the past week. But it's true. And I love what Natalie said around nutrients versus ingredients. And obviously, Dr. Bob, who is our co-founder, feels very strongly about that as well. And when we're looking at the 4-factor framework and we're thinking about what our goals are and how we're going to measure them and what are we going to share, transparency and traceability are really important to us. And I think that it starts with education because, again, we need to get across to pet parents that there is a big difference between nutrients and ingredients. And, we did, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, and we did a Harris poll last year and surveyed pet parents across the country just to get a feeling about, what are the most important things to them when they are buying foods and treats, but primarily foods for their animals. And of course, nutrition came up. And our question that we're really excited about learning was, would you consider a plant-based diet if you were getting, or if you knew your animal was getting the ultimate nutrition, the optimal nutrition? And 65% of them said yes. And so, I think that, as Natalie said, consumers are driving what things are looking like. They're very savvy. Pet parents are savvy. They're understanding the difference between nutrients and ingredients. And so they want the traceability, they want the transparency, but they also want to know that we in the pet industry are actually thinking differently about our overall footprint, our sustainable footprint. And we need to do that through the reduction of animal industrial agriculture. And this is one way, an easy way to do it, but we have to do it as an industry, and we have to start with education. And it's something that we've been talking about a lot at Earth Animal, and is a big piece of why we implemented the Earth Animal animal welfare framework. So yeah.
Thank you. Jennifer, as you think about plants and plant-based diets, there's plenty of research in the human food systems that it meets the dietary and nutritional needs of humans. Pets and companion pets are different. Can you talk to what plant proteins, what we should be considering when you think about bioavailability for pets utilizing plant proteins?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, of course, dogs, cats, and humans have very different nutritional requirements, but as has been discussed here already, it's important to remember that pets need nutrients, of course, not ingredients. So this is something that we were really interested at ADM, and my colleague, Dr. Derek Davenport, was particularly interested in this. And so he worked to develop a research partnership with the University of Illinois to look at that very question, to look at the bioavailability of plant and alternative proteins, including peas, soy, and yeast in dogs and cats. Now, because there's limited types of research that we can do with dogs and cats, this research was done in a rooster model to look at the digestibility of the individual amino acids. And the research was published in scientific journals, so I can absolutely share that information with attendees if they're interested. And we also published a technical bulletin to make that information a little bit more digestible, so to speak, for the pet food industry. So one interesting finding of that research was that dried yeast really was found to have a high protein quality score in both adult dogs and cats. And so that research shows that plant-based proteins, plant-based amino acids really can be used as a digestible and bioavailable protein source for companion animals.
Do we have, Natalie, a sense of the volume and the environmental impact of those plant proteins? Do you need more plant protein to meet the nutritional needs of companion animals?
Not necessarily. There's a lot of plant-based protein sources out there that are super rich in protein, even more protein dense than some meat-based protein sources. So it's not exactly that we need more plant-based to meet the requirements. I have seen some comments come up that I'd like to address, and it's the fact that certainly formulating with plant-based protein sources isn't as simple as it seems. Plant-based protein sources are known to be limiting in some of the specific amino acids that pets need. So you can't just throw a bunch of plant-based protein sources in there or one plant-based protein source in there and expect all of the nutrient requirements of the pet to be met. But there are different complementary protein sources. For example, peas have a different amino acid profile than potatoes. So when you put them together, you're able to complete or make a more complete protein source. And also you'll see in a lot of plant-based or really any pet food formulations out there, we do have the availability as formulators to look to synthetic amino acids, which are extremely bioavailable. So for pet food companies who are interested in formulating with plant-based ingredients and they're concerned about the bioavailability of nutrients, well, Jennifer has just talked about the research that exists to show that they might be more bioavailable than we think, but we also have the tools, such as synthetic amino acids, to make sure that we're supplementing those if they're needed to really make sure that we're meeting the amino acid requirements of pets.
Okay. Any other panelists want to comment on this particular question?
If I may, just to clarify and nuance some of this, because as Natalie said, it's not just a matter of plant nutrients. It's about nutrients, and I would also say from our science, whole food ingredients. There is inherent complexity and synergy in whole food ingredients. So it's not an either or, it's an and it's nuanced. So I just want to add that to the conversation because, you know, we have board certified veterinary nutritionists on our staff. We do a lot of scientific work ourselves. So we know that there's a lot there at that nutrient level, the flavonoids, the polyphenols that create the extra benefits that come from meat that is very different to what comes from plants. And so, you know, I'm not here to advocate for the meat industry as much as I'm not here to advocate for the plant industry. I'm here to advocate for what's best for pets. We know cats are carnivores. They have very distinct needs. Dogs are omnivores. They have other needs, and also by breed and age, etc. So it's a very complex discussion. It's one, and I think this is tough for the industry because there's lots of views and philosophies, and the science is not complete and it's always evolving. But you know, I think by everyone here today, and certainly my point of view is to be open to learning and adapting as we go to a more sustainable future.
Mm-hmm. Great. I think one of the things that comes up frequently when I'm speaking with members is interest in alternative proteins, alternative protein sourcing, whether it's grown meats or insect proteins. Jennifer, do you want to just address some of the opportunities with alternative protein sourcing and some of the obstacles?
Yeah, there are definitely new and emerging protein sources, and regulatory challenges are one of them. But we want to continue to support our customers to have new protein options available. And so ADM's investing in companies that will really be producing what may be the proteins of the future, such as cultivated meat or fungal protein. Of course, insect protein is another option, and I saw in the introductions that there are some people from insect protein companies in the audience. And so you may have heard that we recently announced that we've entered into an agreement with AnovaFeed to commercialize black soldier fly larvae into the US pet food market. And so this partnership really underscores our desire to include more sustainable alternative proteins with nutritional and environmental benefits into our ingredient portfolio. And one of the unique things about AnovaFeed's production in terms of environmental impact is that their facilities are co-located with other feed plants. So they will be building a facility in Decatur, Illinois that is co-located with one of ADM's corn processing facilities. And as a result, the AnovaFeed facility can use waste heat, they can use feedstock from the corn processing facility. So you don't need trucking to deliver the feedstock, and you don't need extra energy. So that really helps to reduce the carbon footprint of the insect rearing. Fascinating.
Are other companies on the panel really focused on alternative proteins, and is this the salvation for the environmental impact? What are the challenges related to, for example, the availability of alternative proteins? Gordon, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, you know, we'd love to champion an acceleration of alternatives here, but as we've discussed on separate occasions, and the regulatory framework here in the United States is just so behind where the rest of the world is. And you know, we're part of a family company, AgriLehmann, has a big business in Europe, and we're constantly comparing where we are in the US versus Europe. And as you know, Europe is moving much faster on alternatives to conventional meat proteins. And as you know, AFCO here, the FDA, there's still, I think the legislation someone told me was framed in 1946 or 47, right? So this whole industry is based on some very old views of you know, the calories that humans need, let alone the byproducts that we all utilize in this industry. And so, look, we would definitely like to champion moves in this direction, but we're also finding it, you know, black soldier fly. You can have black soldier fly, and black soldier fly is the only option, but we know there's a lot of other things we'd like to get to, but we just can't.
Mm-hmm. Steffi, what alternative sources are Earth Animal looking at or utilizing?
Yeah, so part of our animal welfare framework, Anne, is that we are dedicating 5% of our annual profits to actually participate in some of this third-party research, and that is something that we're working on. For us, it's, again, because we're really trying to look at this incredibly complex situation, but the 4-factor framework to make sure that we are going in a direction that both our industry, but also pet parents can understand, and that is really around choice. And so we've partnered with Paul Shapiro at the Better Meat Company to put together some formulations for our treats and our no hides, and we are going to be launching those at Global Pet. And it's really more of a trial and a test phase to gain as much learnings as possible through our retailer partnerships. We're not starting with foods, we're starting with the treats and chews, and sort of providing this choice, this opportunity for choice with a rating system. So what is the difference between no meat versus plant-based versus having eggs, and then also providing an LCA, a life cycle assessment on the different processes to make sure that we're not just looking at it from one of those four factors, but all of those factors. So how is the environmental impact on that? And are we using, less industrial agriculture through there? So I think, the first thing we're doing is partnering with the Better Meat Company to work with Paul in the fermentation process and using the plant-based ingredients there, learning, gaining feedback from our retailers and from pet parents, and then we'll be able to use that. We are also in the process of putting together formulations for a reducitarian. So less meat, more plant-based, and seeing how those formulations can work in around the nutritional elements, making sure that they provide the optimal nutrition as well. And we're hoping for those test processes to start shortly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Jennifer, as somebody who's been deeply involved in and committed to research and science in the pet industry for years, how is ADM approaching some of these obstacles and challenges? And how can the industry as a whole begin to move forward?
Yeah, I think that from a regulatory perspective, we do need to work together as an industry to get some of these new proteins accepted for pet food, because it really does take a lot of research, a lot of effort, and it's hard for one company, one brand to do that. And so as an ingredient supplier, we need to do the research on our ingredients so that that's then available for brands, and the brands need to do the research and the education to teach the customers about those new options. So I think it really is a group effort for sure.
Yeah. We've spent a good amount of time on nutrition, which is critical. I'd love to touch on the social welfare in the supply chain as well, since that's a critical part of how we view at PSC the four-factor framework. Natalie, I know Petcurian is doing interesting work on the social welfare side of this. Would you like to share some of the work that you're doing and how Petcurian approaches the social responsibility part of this?
Yeah, definitely. When we approach sustainability, of course, we look at it from an environmental impact, but we try and cover the 3 Ps, pets, people, and the planet. So people being obviously a huge aspect of that. And actually just recently we rolled out our supplier code of conduct. It was just last month that we rolled it out, and we're starting to get some signed copies back in from our partners. And that's really holding our suppliers and our partners accountable for both their social and their environmental impacts. Questions on there like their labor practices, fair wages, human rights, EDI, health and safety, all very important things to consider. And we as a company have the responsibility to hold our partners to the same standards that our consumers are holding us to.
Great. Any other panelists want to share some of their work on the social welfare side?
I think that's great, Natalie. Oh, go ahead, Gordon. No, go ahead.
You go.
It's all you.
Occupational health and safety is our #1 priority. is deeply embedded in our culture. And our facilities up in Lincoln, Nebraska were recently recognized with an excellent rating by SQF, which is an independent audit of your safe and food quality, safety for the food, but also for the premises, because as per your 4-factor framework, and there's a lot of people get sick at the workplace here in the United States, particularly in the ozone and in the air. The quality is very poor, and the practices by companies. So we're very proud of the fact that our work premises are rated as healthy and safe. And in addition, that helps feed high retention rates, which in this industry, we're all struggling to find people to work. And so this has been quite a flag that we can carry and help people feel good about coming to our place, and they're not going to feel sick because of the work that they're doing. Sorry, Steffi, go for it.
No, Gordon, I was going to add something similar, but I do want to just commend Natalie and Petcurian on the work that they're doing. And so, yes, both of our manufacturing facilities are also SQF certified, and that was, that's an intense process, and that's something that I think is really important because it is our responsibility to make sure that all of our employees and internal and external stakeholders are taken care of. And then we're also in the process of, with the PSC, reformalizing our supply chain code of conduct. And it really starts with that discovery process and actually engaging our stakeholders in that process and asking them what is important to them, what will make them feel safe, what does a good solid living wage look like. And I think there's so much opportunity in our industry for us to be better at that because of all of the facilities, the processing facilities, the manufacturing facilities. And I was just recently on a call with Compassionate World Farming to talk about the Better Chicken Commitment. And just even if, more of us sign on to that specific species commitment, that inherently will provide much, much better socially impactful situations for people because of where they're working in the processing facilities today versus where they can be. And I know, Gordon, you have much more experience with that overseas, right, internationally, but we are so behind in the United States, and we really need to come together as an industry, as companies, and collaborate so that we can move this forward as quickly as possible.
Why don't you mention that, Stephanie, if I may, because to your point, I had not heard about salmonella in chicken until I came to the United States, and then someone educated me the way chickens are brought up here, and the environment itself drives these increased levels of pathogens compared to the way chickens are raised, say, in Australia, New Zealand, Europe. So it gets back to, from what I've learned, very old regulations and laws. Yes,
absolutely. And it's a great opportunity, I think, for PSC to work with all of us as members, but also to work with, or try to work with AFCO and the FDA. And it's challenging, I know, but there's hope because we all know that consumers, pet parents, this is what they're asking for. This is what they need. This is what we need to understand and get retailers to understand that the time is now. It's a necessity.
100%.
Speaking of time, I want to make sure that we give plenty of time to the questions that are coming in from the audience. We have a lot of great questions, and we have my colleague Ashley Lane here to help field the questions that are coming in. Hi, Ashley.
Hey, everybody.
Do you want to get us kicked off with some questions that have come in? I know that several have come in on chat and many on the Q&A section as well.
Yeah, I'm going to selfishly kind of throw this one out first because this is something I've experienced with a pet, and as a consumer myself has influenced my decisions on what foods I will buy for my canine companion. So someone is asking, we still have customers who are concerned about DCM from foods containing certain plant-based proteins. Do you have a response for this when we're communicating with them around that? I would maybe look to either Jennifer or Natalie for that.
I'd be happy to jump in. For anyone who'd like to learn a little bit more, we have a white paper on our website that talks about all things DCM. But really, I think the thing that we need to focus on is that
Natalie?
Yep.
Will you just quickly touch on what DCM is in case anyone in the audience is unfamiliar?
Sure. So in 2018, the FDA released a report where they saw some kind of correlation between diets containing pulse ingredients and DCM, which is dilated cardiomyopathy, and it's a heart condition in pets. But so that was in 2018, and a few years later now, all of the work that has come out, at least scientific-based work, has shown that there's no correlation or there's no causation between diets that have pulse-based ingredients or grain-free recipes and DCM in dogs. And we've seen dogs that are eating grain-free and grain-inclusive recipes have DCM. So I think it's just calling for more research to be done. Obviously, dogs just don't get DCM for no reason, but I don't think it's as cause and effect as the FDA may made it seem to be. And there's some recent research from the University of Guelph, actually, that just came out a few weeks ago, where they fed dogs diets with different pulse inclusions from 0% pulses all the way up to 45% pulses, and saw no difference in any of the ECG parameters or any of the heart parameters. So we're not quite sure exactly what might be going on, but I think it's a little bit too soon to point any fingers at specific ingredients. And really, as long as companies are doing their due diligence in formulating their recipes and making sure that the nutrient requirements are met, then that's really what's the most important thing, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Jen, do you want to add anything to that? I know you.
You did a great job covering it.
Awesome.
Thank you. That was a really helpful and complete response. I appreciate it. So at the beginning, we were talking a little bit about alternative and insect proteins, and we also talked a little bit, Gordon, you touched on this, about kind of the lag of the US behind the EU in this space. And this question, I think, could be more a little bit on like the marketing consumer perception side, but just wondering, based on any of your experiences, how you feel like insect-based proteins are coming along in the US, and if there's an appetite for that within our consumer base, just kind of considering where the EU is kind of considerably ahead of that with inclusion.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that, Ashley, because words do matter. And it's interesting when you say things like insects, unfortunately, there's a reflex reaction. But if you call them land anthropods, you get a different reaction. And what I mean by that, conceptually, we're okay with concepts like shrimp and lobster and other crustacean, and they're all part of that same family, right? It's just that land anthropods are insects. And so I think that's what part of my frustration, because, you know, there's crickets, there's grasshoppers, all sorts of other land anthropods that we could include in this mix. And I just think part of the opportunity as well as the frustration is how do we open this completely up and don't just have a narrow focus on black lava fly, larvae, etc. So as Stephanie said, the workaround at the moment is to introduce them as treats, but it's a slow road if you really want to make a meaningful impact on reducing greenhouse gases, because you've got to get to food. Food is the main game here. That's where the $30 billion in this industry, and just again reframing, 20 to 30% or whatever pet food contributes to GHG. So we've got to make these impacts, and we've got to unleash both the power of science together with all the options on the table that people like Natalie and Jennifer can formulate with.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is a question kind of coming back into the space between the supply chain code of conduct and that touching on the aspect of social welfare. I can even see in the background on your photo there, Gordon, about GAP animal certification. And that is really, great as far as at the farm level. But as we were talking, there are a lot of social implications at the processing level. So wondering kind of what experience you guys have had with any movement towards certifications at that level or within your supply chain of code of conducts, like what is being done or what is kind of how are we thinking about the space and really ensuring the safety of the processing of animals and kind of that step in between the farm and your manufacturing facility.
Go for it, Stephanie.
Well, I wasn't sure if you were asking Gordon or not. And
That was an open invite.
Okay. So I was waiting for Gordon to answer. This is definitely talk about complexity. This is incredibly complex, and I think it's sort of this larger situation that we have in the industry, because we don't. We're not as good about knowing really that traceability and that transparency as some other industries, but it's getting better. And I do think that it's got to start there. And I'm sorry to go back to the Better Chicken Commitment. It's just fresh on my mind because that's the direction that we're moving into. And, I think that when you sign on to a species specific commitment like that, or even when you don't and you're doing a supply chain code of conduct, again, you're aligning with your suppliers and ensuring that they are aligned with your expectations right then and there. And if they're not, then it's up to us, and it's our responsibility to actually find the ones that do align with our expectations as manufacturers, as innovators, as product developers, and manufacturers, and even processors. So I do think that it's a hard process, and sometimes the information that you find out isn't good, but you benchmark and you learn from it, and it gets better, and it's just this continuous improvement. And I encourage people to reach out to the PSC to talk about what that process is really like around supply chain code of conduct, because I do think, traceability leads to transparency, and that's the only way that we're going to be able to ensure that people are safe in those working conditions, because we're setting the pace, we're setting the expectation. This is what we want for those people. And that's the only way we're going to be able to do it.
Thank you. Jennifer, I'm going to direct this question at you, but if anyone else has a response or wants to jump in, please feel free. You mentioned earlier about your supply of soy being deforestation-free, guaranteed. Is there any issue with supply and demand there, or a shortage of supply of responsibly produced soy that can be traced back to deforestation-free sources? Just kind of curious of your experience with that.
I will have to look into that for you. We have a whole division that looks after the soy aspect of the business, but if that's something that someone is particularly interested in, I can absolutely make those connections.
We did get questions coming back to the conversation earlier about with the plant-based proteins and the bio needs of cats versus dogs, and just wanting to maybe hear a little bit more about how you guys are thinking about those differences within formulation, and is, for cat food manufacturers and formulas, is there different set of considerations there, and kind of how we're thinking about that?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. Of course, cats are obligate carnivores. So what that means is that there are specific nutrients that they need that are not available from plant-based sources, things like taurine and arachidonic acid. So when you're formulating a cat recipe, you have to, of course, make sure that those nutrients are available for cats, but it doesn't mean that you can't use other sustainable protein sources to supplement those animal-based protein sources. So many of our cat recipes, of course, have meat in them, but they also have things like peas and potatoes, because you don't always have to rely completely on meat to supply those proteins to cats. Another great option, it's not a vegan option, but it is a vegetarian option, is to consider things like egg. Egg is a super high quality protein and more sustainable than meat itself. But yes, of course, it has to be considered that cats are obligate carnivores and we have to meet their nutrient requirements the most responsible way possible. But it doesn't mean that we can't use plant-based protein sources to help do that.
Awesome, thanks.
We have time for about one more question, Ashley.
Okay, well, a couple different questions here about the sustainability of byproducts and whether or not those are a more sustainable option. I think intuitively, if we think about using the whole animal versus not, then that seems kind of obvious, but wondering kind of what are more affordable options there, and also getting a question about how chicken meat and their byproducts have become so commoditized. How do you get them into a place where it's price competitive with alternative proteins and byproducts? So just how you guys are thinking about that.
Yeah, there's a lot to that question. I was about to say, maybe we can break it down, but I think to your point, yes, chicken is ubiquitous, and a part of our philosophy is for pets as well as humans is to rotate your diets. You know, your sources of meat, vegetable, proteins, whatever. Mix it up, build your bowl, which has been one of the catch cries of the industry recently. But it's really tough, and prices are skyrocketing at the moment, as I think all our panelists are seeing, and a lot of these alternatives to chickens are becoming more and more out of reach. But I think getting back to maybe your earlier point, Ashley, we definitely embrace the whole of animal approach. Whilst there is still meat, as much as we talk about plants, I don't see meat going away for a long, long time. So the fact that, you know, we can help the environment, as you can see by my other side, by upcycling, is the other key thing that we are supporting, and really want to make sure this industry takes credit for it, and that you know, we see that as part of how this industry can help our overall society, that we utilize the whole animal, nothing gets to waste. And again, the term byproducts, particularly driven by AFCO, stops becoming this negative word and becomes a positive word. And again, defining byproducts as the good parts of the animal, whether it's the chicken hearts and livers, the spleen, these are all very nutrient rich that would otherwise go to wasted landfill if not used in our food. So that's part of what, again, regulations need to allow us to basically more fully describe what is inherent in these products, but we're not allowed to today.
Thank you. I want to thank the whole panel. We have one more poll. Amy, do you want to launch our poll? Great. Can everyone see that? The current 4-factor framework, which are you considering in your sourcing decisions most importantly? Not surprising, nutrition is coming up quite strong. 75%, 78%. Wonderful. Nutritional requirements followed by environmental impact, social and animal welfare. So with that, I just want to thank all of the panelists. Anyone, we will be sending out a recording of this. If you're interested in reaching out to a panelist, please feel free to reach out to someone at PSC at info@Pet Sustainability Coalition, and we'll help put you in touch with a panelist, their expertise. I know there have been a lot of great suggestions and ideas and sharing that have been going on in the chat, so we will capture that as well. And just want to thank everyone for attending and for paying attention to this really important topic.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Did I miss the last poll? Thanks, Amy.
No worries. Yeah, thank you so much, Anne.
Oh my gosh, you're amazing. Thank you. All right, so highest rating, 56%.
And thank you all so much for coming. We will be in touch soon with the recording too. But yes, Anne, we have quite a few responses. I did close that poll though, because people were leaving.